least some of the answer to these issues of compassion fatigue and burnout have to do with making our practice environments the very, very best they can be so that nurses and other clinicians can really connect and care for patients in the ways that they want to be able to do that and the patients need them to be able to do. So I think there's a lot that is here already and will be coming, and I feel pretty optimistic about it.
You're listening to the ONS podcast, where ONS Voices Talk Cancer, a resource from the Oncology Nursing Society. Through conversations with subject matter experts, we examine the important issues in oncology nursing, from new treatments to patient-centered research to advancements in clinical practice. Join us as we hear from nurses in all facets of oncology care, from bench to bedside and everywhere in between.
Hello and welcome to the ONS podcast. I'm your host, Christine Ladd, member of the ONS 50th Anniversary Committee. Today, I'm joined by Ann Gross, Senior Vice President for Patient Care Services and Chief Nursing Officer at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute in Boston, Massachusetts, and Tracy Gosselin, Senior Vice President and Chief Nursing Executive at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York, New York, to talk about the evolution of burnout and compassion fatigue in oncology nursing. This episode is part of a series celebrating the 50th anniversary of ONS. Throughout 2025, we'll feature monthly episodes exploring ONS's rich history and promising future. Thanks for joining us, Ann and Tracy.
A pleasure to be here.
To start, what workplace challenges did oncology nurses face when you enter the nursing field? What kinds of coping strategies did you use? Let's start with you, Ann.
I would say that the workplace challenges at the time that I entered the field in some ways are not so dissimilar from today, but I would say certainly it was more of a learn on the job kind of training rather than the kinds of resources that we have today to transition nurses into practice. There were no simulation centers or strong residency programs. I think coming into practice, there was more of a partnering of a new graduate like myself with more senior nurses and the leadership. I happen to be on a unit with a strong leadership. So I think that although the similarities would be in the patient population, I was on an oncology unit and early in practice. And just like today, we were dealing with very sick patients. We were dealing with death and dying. We were administering very toxic treatments and really pushing a field forward in oncology. So there were similar challenges, but I think different from today. There weren't the kind of resources, there wasn't the body of work that's been done today around compassion fatigue and burnout, work-life balance and things like that. There was not that body of literature and science like there is today. And so there was more of a grassroots kind of support building in the clinical environment that I think I experienced.
Tracy, what are your thoughts?
Similar to Ann's, I think we know when we talk about burnout, there was compassion fatigue back when I started, yet I don't think we named it that as well. I also believe there was incivility and bullying, and I think it's a different place in time. Things have changed over time. So there was that. Staffing, we think about staffing depending on where you are in the country and the world. There's always an oversupply and an undersupply, and then there's the point of what demand means. I do remember those days as well. Also at a time when managed care organizations were entering the U.S. healthcare landscape, we were changing how we provided care. So those changing dynamics in care delivery back when I started, fast forward to today, we're seeing the same things, whether we're looking at bundled payments. And at the end of the day, cost mitigation has always been something there of how do you deliver care new, differently? How do we remove waste from the system to provide more effective and efficient care? And also to help people through their journey of healthcare. So a lot of similarities. Sometimes what we call it is a little different. And I think the great part is we've done research to help us understand it, not maybe to solve it, but to help us understand it.
When you think back on your time as a brand new oncology nurse, how does that compare to the current workplace environment of oncology nursing?
I have to say that my first experience as a new graduate, the longer I'm in nursing and as an oncology nurse, the more fortunate I realized I was then. I was on a unit that had this could have something to do with my path into leadership, but had a very, very strong leader, nurse leader. And so, as I said before, it was real on the job training. I had never seen a patient die before. There were all these firsts for me. Had I not had that strong leader who also built a team and created an environment of practice where I was supported, I know that other new nurses in practice have different, less favorable experiences, but I was very fortunate to have that kind of support, really grassroots, really at the unit level. There was a sense of community. And so as I'd had to deal as any new graduate and nurse in practice begins to experience things that you only read about in books or had case studies that you talked about in the classroom, when it came to really experiencing them, I had a kind of support system with other people in my unit that I think was, as I said, in retrospect, incredibly special. And I think that exists today. And in some places, it doesn't exist. I've always held on to that idea of the importance of leadership for nurses. And then as I progressed as a practicing nurse, I always looked at where I was going, who was going to be the leader, what was that team like? Because I believe that really can make a difference one way or another. The kind of practice environment that gets cultivated and that you work in as a nurse really has a lot to do with how supported you're going to be.
I think we all understand that compassion fatigue and nurse burnout is multifaceted with an array of contributors. Tracy, what do you see are the major contributors to oncology nurse burnout and compassion fatigue today? Do you see different challenges for the frontline oncology nurse from those in other oncology nursing roles like research and leadership?
I think there's a lot of contributors. I think we are still in post-COVID recovery. I even hate to say that. Yet when I think about what happened to our country and our world, things got turned upside down. And trying to think about how do we deliver care post that, when we think about new nurses who were entering the profession during that time and in the years post, their training, their basic education and training looked different. It felt different. And that preparation for them, I think, was also very different. When I think about that piece of our work, what we asked nurses to do, what we asked healthcare professionals to do, made it really hard. So I think when we think about one of the major contributors, I think there's a piece of that. I think there's also a piece when we think about nurses and the work we do. We also have families. We have aging parents and children. And sometimes that burnout is multifactorial in that we have family obligations and other obligations that make it really hard. And for some people, they say work is their escape from some of that. Yet it's all hard to balance sometimes. I think one of the other big contributors is poorly designed systems. When we provide inefficient care, use multiple systems that aren't connected, and our ways of knowing the patient, knowing our colleagues is disrupted. I think that is one of the key pieces is what are the systems of how we provide care? And that can be anything from IT to clinic sessions to inpatient care delivery, those processes that underline our systems of care, and how do we get more efficient at it and get the extra work out and steps that we ask both patients and their loved ones to do, as well as all of us as a discipline. When I think about researchers, leadership, and their challenges, I think they're similar and yet different. Researchers, we talk a lot about independent funding and the challenges we're facing within our economic climate right now around what does funding look like? Where will funding come from in the future? So different responsibilities for them as well. And when we think about those nurse scientists within our clinical platforms, why their work is so essential in improving those outcomes. When we think about leadership roles, I think it's some of the same challenges, right? Leaders are being asked to do more with less. And that's at all levels of leadership. Expenses we know are going up more than our revenues sometimes. And being able to look at that and balance that is critical. We think about differences across urban versus rural areas in our country and mitigating some of those factors and to help ultimately the patients we serve. Yet at the end of the day, I think the work across the many roles of our profession adds so much value that part of it is up to us around coming together to talk through how do we see those major contributors? How do we work smarter together? And how do we ultimately innovate on some of these topics to make it better for our discipline as well as for patients who seek care from us?
As a nurse executive, would you share how you've seen other healthcare organizations contribute to the challenge of compassion fatigue and the ways they've worked to mitigate it?
I would say, as kind of starting off of from what Tracy was saying, we're so challenged in healthcare right now with many different pressures coming on us from different directions and lots of financial pressures and financial uncertainty and the need to try to make it all work. And I think that organizations have to be very careful that that doesn't play out in the clinical environment. And I think shifts that are made to be too long or workloads that are not tended to, that are not based on acuity measures and just on numbers. I think things like that and attention to the practice environment itself are things that can really contribute to burnout and compassion fatigue. And I think there's so much work and research and more knowledge now about the things that we can do to mitigate them. And some of them, many of them, don't really cost a lot of money. So I think of the focus on the practice environment. And when I say the practice environment, I mean, we have to pay attention to workload with our staff. We have to pay attention to the dynamics in the workload. Tracy mentioned incivility and bullying. We have to develop our leaders and our staff with the tools to confront those behaviors because those are toxic to the environment. We all spend too much time at work. Our nurses, our frontline staff are doing just in and of itself incredibly stressful, very rewarding, but also very stressful care. We have to be sure that they're able to practice in an environment that is supportive and is going to help them be their best. I think also creating the space to gather and debrief around cases that are losses of patients, whatever the case may be. So many things happen in a clinical environment in oncology. It's such a dynamic place, but being able to recognize that we can't just have these kind of things happen and not support each other through them. So I think those are some ways that, there's lots of other sorts of information that can be brought. I think ONS is phenomenal and the resources that are put forward that we all can access. But I think there's information that you can give. There's information to learn about the various things that contribute to compassion fatigue or burnout. And then there is experiential reality and day to day. I think we need to, and hospitals that are effectively dealing with this issue are taking a multi-pronged approach and really looking at the experiences, the work experience, the work environment, as well as providing the resources and information about self-care and well-being and so on. And I think I go back to leaders, but as leaders, we have to be advocates for the patients, advocates for our staff, and really figuring out ways to make sure that we have the right resources at the bedside and improvise and be efficient elsewhere to protect that very important place in work.
ONS has continually provided insight to and support resources for compassion fatigue and burnout in oncology nurses. Tracy, can you tell us which ONS resources you have found to be the most helpful?
When I started my career, a nurse manager at the time said, "Why don't you come with me to a local ONS meeting?" And I thought, oh, what is this? And I was all excited. And what was so great is I found colleagues I worked with there, as well as other colleagues within the area in which I lived that worked at other institutions. It brought me into this community of similar, like-minded people focused on the same type of work. And it really created this network for me that led to more engagement in the society. And I think that's really important because one of the things when we think about ONS Congress, being in your local chapter, you go with a few people, you meet other people then at the larger national meeting, that connection and then that mentorship over time, mentorship comes in many ways. And I think it's the realization that everybody is facing challenges. Some might be more ahead of you, some might be behind you. And the resources that ONS offers are wonderful. The other piece I would say is I enjoy reading. So I like to see what's in our journals. What are other people doing? How could we twist that for maybe where we are? How could that look different if we did that when we talk about compassion fatigue and burnout and what are others doing? So I think it's different resources, some reading and some through connection with people in the local chapter and at Congress.
We're living in such an exciting time as technology affects everything around us, especially in healthcare. So many innovations continue to hit the market and have potential to mitigate burnout and compassion fatigue. Tracy, are new technologies and innovations helping oncology nurses manage the challenges of burnout and compassion fatigue in their current practice?
I think it's this question that people like Anne, myself, other chief nurses are saying, if we add this new technology, what are we going to take away? Do we need another alarm to ring to the phone or to their badge? How much can you ask people to do and not be distracted when they're at point of care delivering patient care? Technology should never be a distractor, nor should it tell us how to practice. The technologies we have today, I'm like, wow, I wish I had that when I started my career. And yet there's also a double-edged sword to that I think we have to balance when we think about care and care delivery. Innovation, I think there's a lot of ways to talk about that when we talk about burnout and compassion fatigue. I think one of the key pieces we have to ask ourselves, though, is are we striving to fix something that we already have a problem with today, or are we recreating something that's shiny and new? I think it goes back to some of it is the systems we have in place that we should fix. And how do we innovate them for the interprofessional team? I don't think burnout and compassion fatigue are just an issue relegated to oncology nurses. I think our physician counterparts, our advanced practice counterparts, everyone who interacts to care for our patients. So I think there's a lot of work that's been done in silos of disciplines within. But really, I think it's a conversation that's more engaging of how do we do this work as a team to support everyone? And I think that's a direction in the innovation space we need to move into.
As technology continues to evolve and new innovations are developed, what are you most excited to see that will positively impact the experience of the oncology nurse and help minimize the risk of compassion fatigue and burnout?
Well, I think there are various things that I'm excited about. I agree with Tracy. We have to be very careful and intentional about jumping on the technology or AI train just because it's the newest, flashiest thing coming in, but instead think about it in terms of, for example, one of the big things I think that nurses and all clinicians are facing now is this administrative burden. And how can we use, and we're beginning, and I think a lot of systems are beginning to look at how do we leverage AI to reduce the administrative burden on our clinicians? Why do we go into nursing to begin with? Because we want to provide that care to the patient. We don't want to be trapped behind a computer all day. How do we use technology and leverage things like AI to reduce that administrative burden or to synthesize all the data and everything that's coming at a nurse on a unit on a daily basis and bring forward these predictive models that can help direct a unit to which patient where might be deteriorating faster than somebody else and what might be impending. How do we use technology in that way so that our skilled nurses can be fulfilled in doing what they trained and educated themselves to do and not be burdened by all these other things that we have to do that are important to do from a regulatory perspective or whatever, but that machines could perhaps help us with. So I think there's a lot of potential there. I am really excited about that because I do think, at least some of the answer to these issues of compassion fatigue and burnout have to do with making our practice environments the very, very best they can be so that nurses and other clinicians can really connect and care for patients in the ways that they want to be able to do that and the patients need them to be able to do. So I think there's a lot that is here already and will be coming, and I feel pretty optimistic about it.
ONS has numerous opportunities to volunteer and influence the future of the oncology nursing profession. Tracy, what advice would you give to new members about how these opportunities can help them prevent or work through the challenges of compassion fatigue?
I think one of the key pieces people should find is a trusted colleague. I was fortunate. I had a clinical nurse specialist who worked with me early on, who said, you have a lot of passion, Tracy. You have to figure out your purpose. In other words, you better figure out how to manage your enthusiasm and energy. Having that type of trusted colleague to help you is critical. I don't think I can say enough of that. And sometimes it might be another nurse. Sometimes it might not be. I think the other piece, when I think about new members, there's so many opportunities to join ONS and to become engaged. And I think this goes back to where are you in your career? What is it that you're looking for? I think there's a variety of pieces there. And if there's any students listening to this, I think one of the good things is to join as a nursing student. You get to see a little bit more about the society, understand it, understand the resources, which I think are really important. If you're looking for a mentor, talk to your leader, talk to others about that. Because I think at the end of the day, the better grounded you become in your values and your personal mission of the work you're doing, I think it helps you put things into perspective.
And how does Tracy's advice apply to longtime members of ONS?
I think it's very pertinent to longtime ONS members too. There's so many resources, first of all, that ONS provides to all of us at all levels and all points in our career and our path from novice to experts. And the needs, though, are the same. We need, whether you're a novice nurse or whether you're a very experienced nurse, you need to continue to learn and to get new information. And ONS is an incredible resource for that. But you also need, as I think both of us keep alluding to and emphasizing here, you also need the connection to other people. And that's what ONS provides, that opportunity to get connected to other people that might be working in some other part of the country or other part of the world, but is dealing with similar things that you're dealing with. So it provides that opportunity. And then it also provides an opportunity to get involved. I think when you can get involved and be part of solving a problem, it doesn't then control you and you won't feel defeated by it. So I think her thoughts really apply across the board to all of us in oncology nursing.
As we end our podcast today, would you both share with our listeners how your ONS membership has helped you manage compassion fatigue and burnout in your own career journeys?
I have used the various services and opportunities in ONS throughout my career. I would say the biggest benefit for me has been that opportunity to connect to others who might have made some progress in some area of something I'm dealing with. That's really important to me. I am a people person. Like all of us now, we're in a time in our society where we consume information differently. We're all into podcasts and apps. And the wonderful thing about ONS is that it has evolved with us in that. And so I can get information about things that are influencing my own fatigue or feelings of burnout in different ways through materials, but nothing substitutes that connection to others. And then for me personally, I'm a take action kind of person. I feel better when I'm trying to do something about a problem that I'm having. So there's lots of opportunities within ONS to get involved, to take action. And it is, as oncology nurses, it's our professional society. And I feel that way. And I feel that I can contribute and I can get involved and be part of continuing to evolve our profession. And that is, for me, a very enriching and powerful resource.
I think for me, very similar to Anne, my membership has allowed me to give back, serve the society, its members. And I like to thank the people that we care for in different ways across different care settings. And that's really important. I think that's where you find your joy, and it helps manage some of the other issues when we talk about compassion, fatigue, and burnout, because they're not just issues that occur at the front line. I think it is throughout many roles, as we've talked about here. I also think there's this piece of the joy of moving through your career, and that you learn how to reframe, how to change your perspective, rebuild your energy, ask for what you need. And to Anne's point, reach out to your colleagues when you're trying to do problem solving on how creative they have been. And that's been one really great thing about my ONS membership. Meeting Anne, meeting other colleagues at various points in my career, just unbelievably helpful. And at the end of the day, it just reminds me that I'm not alone.
There's an example as a leader that I would love to share about my own journey and compassion, fatigue, and burnout. And that has to and how I depended on ONS and reached out to ONS, and ONS was right there. And that was for us as leaders during the pandemic. I don't know any leader across the country who felt more vulnerable than we did in how are we going to keep our patients safe? How are we going to keep our staff safe? How are we going to get through this? What's the latest knowledge in different aspects of how this virus was being transmitted? And ONS partnered with us all the way, every step of the way. As Tracy said, we face these challenges in different ways, in different roles, but it's remarkable to me anyway, how at every point in my career, I have been able to find what I need through the information and resources that ONS provides, but also through the connections that I have. And as Tracy said, never feeling alone, always knowing that there are others who are out there dealing with what I'm dealing with as well. And together we can make progress.
Tracy and Anne, I have very much enjoyed our time today and appreciate your stories and insight and perspectives. And thank you both for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for listening to the ONS podcast. Tell us about your favorite part in this episode by leaving a review wherever you download your podcast. For more resources and information about oncology nursing, visit us at ons.org and ons.org/voice. The ideas and opinions shared in this episode represent those of the guest and not necessarily ONS.